Nana Bunsen may go back way back in terms of the late 60s, 70s. Nana Bunsen to me is a warrior who take up the cause of his people and champion it. And he just didn't start in Britain, he started in Guyana, challenging the British down there over some issues that he faced down there. He was also an athlete and he was very fit, brother. And his height alone, you can't miss him coming, yeah? So to me, the memory of him has been a solid African revolution nationalist. When I say that, I mean that you have some people who are nationalists. You can be a nationalist from Trinidad, Barbados, or Jamaica, but Nana Bunsen is a revolutionary nationalist, and that nationalist means you look at black nationalism complete as a whole. That's Pan-Africanism. Well, Nana Bunsen has been involved in struggle and fighting for African people, especially in Manchester around, dismissal and so on. And also, he was very much involved in challenging the union when there was a closed shop. So he actually break the union, and give black people a chance to become members of the union. And there was these closed shops that you just couldn't get a job in there unless you're a union member. And that's a way of the kind of discrimination that there was practicing against African people. So Nana Bunsen was very instrumental in breaking that, in taking on that campaign. So his work around union work and tribunals and representing African people was awesome, because he took on a lot of tasks. So his involvement with the Pan-African Congress movement is he got involved around the 70s when he got involved in the movement for bring about the struggle to a higher level in that we see ourselves as African people, that we are a whole, just one people, not this individualist behavior. So he joined the Pan-African movement and he became the chairman of the Manchester chapter, because in Manchester we had branches all over the place of these chapters, in the country, and we still do. And Nana Bunsen was very instrumental in pushing for a constant, unification of African people under Pan-Africanism. So he got involved, and he was a very staunch, hard worker in the PACM, in highlighting issues that we face, helping to organize Africa Liberation Day and so on. So his work in doing that is looking into also Africa. His first trip to Africa was with me, because I do a lot of travel in Africa. So I said to him one day, Nana, if you're Pan-Africanist, we have to go home to the continent to see the homeland and see what the task and the struggle is there, the real struggle. So I took him with me when I was invited to Burkina Faso under Thomas Sankara, who got assassinated. We went there and met Thomas Sankara and was part of a conference to discuss, the whole thing about we uniting from the Caribbean to America to Africa, that Thomas Sankara was hosting. So his first experience in Africa with me was last, because certain things that Nana saw in Africa, I think kind of just shocked him, that he would see the kind of openness of the people. If you grow up in the Caribbean as a child, you see women bathing in the river and nobody take no notice of them. And you're coming in a society here where people would attack you. No, Africa is shifting to that. But when we were there in Burkina Faso, and we was in a toilet, and there was with the men toilet, and then women come in and use us, the urinal, and it shocked him. He's really shocked. No, I used to it because I go into Africa. I don't see nothing wrong with that. Now, the thing is with Africa deteriorating the way it is because of Western and Arab influence, it is a major problem, and we have in the kind of abuse and so. He was against this kind of abuse of women and the abuse of the multinational who comes in and abuse our continent in terms of ripping off our raw material. So he campaigned and speak out against those issues. So he had a chance to say what he had to say in Burkina Faso. In fact, the capital of Burkina Faso is known as Ouagadougou. It's a sweet name, but it's a very important place that he went with me. And I met one of Africa's greatest revolutionary, Thomas Sankara, so, and then he went off to Kemet, which most people not know the word Kemet, they know the word Egypt, but the original name is Kemet, the land of the black. Yeah, so he went with his wife to Kemet, and that was another experience, in the Pan-African world that he really appreciated. I've not gone to Egypt, as people call it, but Kemet I haven't got. But when the things settle down, I hope to visit that part of our motherland, and we must take back our motherland. And he's always, in his talk, he'll say that every inch of Africa belongs to us. Don't be coming and telling us about this is sub-Saharan Africa and that is the Arab North. No, the Arabs are basically settlers and invaders and practice Arab racism against African people to this day. Because when you go into Africa, and if you go into Africa with a mindset and you already reach a level of cultural awareness and political awareness, once you go into Africa, it reinforces your political and your commitment to struggle. It makes you more ardent. It makes you see more of the oppression and the violence that are unleashed against our people, both by Arab and white. And then they use African people, just like you have these youths in the community now, the gangs. The gangs are used against each other. They do the same thing in Africa, and some of us like to talk about, look how the Africans are killing each other. We're crazy because we was was enslaved by the European and Arabs, were taken out of Africa and taken to the Caribbean, and 2 islands they take us and break us and put us in the military was Barbados and Jamaica. So when we talk about that, none of us will be able to realize that going into Africa, and when he looks at Africa, and then here knowing that history as well, where we was taken out as prisoners of war and taken back to fight our own brothers. So when people keep on talking about these Africans sell each other, you're cursing your own self because you were involved in capturing your own people under the British, under the Arabs, under the Belgium. You were trained to do that dirty work. So don't go running your mouth. And Nana, he spoke out about that when he realized, when he read the book Empty Sleep, to see these regiments that would form the Caribbean, the West Indian Regiment, they was called, the African Rifle, and they were used to break down the city walls in Africa, because they didn't understand how those walls were built. They could breach them. The white boy didn't know how to breach them. So they had to bring the slaves back to breach these 12-foot, sometimes 12-foot high, 12-foot wide. So they have to use them to breach it. So Nana was very clear about that historical, and it made him more stronger. If you go into Africa and then you realize, you see what the Arabs do and what the whites are doing. Now you got the Chinese and the Indians there. We are in big trouble. So he spoke out about it. He was a very passionate and determined brother who wants to see a change. So he fought for it. It's a pity that sometimes when the ancestors give us somebody of this kind of character, we don't respect them. We don't listen to the message. We turn against them and start not supporting them, but support our enemy against them. And that's one of the things that sometimes bothers him. And when he looks and he looks that he made the commitment, make the sacrifice, and don't really pay too much attention to his own children. That's some commitment. When you sacrifice your own children for the sake of the race, people should respect that. Things like the Saturday schools that they started at the center there in Carmel Row. is a way of getting to the younger people. And he's passionate and he loves young people. He'd sometimes tell me when he spent time passing through here to pick up books and stuff, and he'd talk about his own children. If he regret that he didn't spend more time with his children, but he says sometimes it's a sacrifice you make to do that. Even with me, I got 6 children, and those 6 children, sometimes they don't see me. If I'm off in Africa or somewhere in America or the Caribbean, they don't see me. And if I go to some real dangerous place like, Congo and so on, then they're worried and they'll be on the phone all the time to me. Yeah. So it had an impact with his programs that he was doing for young people. He was doing, like he did a cultural week. He used to do a 1-week program to try and raise level of consciousness. And he did stuff around Grenada during that Grenadian struggle. So they had the Caribbean week up there and so on. And he was very active with the other Caribbean societies inside the center. So he was a staunch figure who keep the center going and bring that kind of consciousness and push to change things. I missed him because when he used to pass through here, and when Barry Shango was here, there was his brethren that from America. Barry Shango has passed off a few years after. He was at the funeral doing the program around Nana. Those 2 brothers, they relate to me, right? I know when they stay with me, they see me as a young person that I must listen to them. And they will tell me, look, you gonna cook the food, Beanie, because you are the junior below us. We are the elders. You go cook the food. You make sure we get our drinks and we put everything on the table. And then we'll talk. So we would then get into, after I cook and stuff, we'll get into some serious political discussion. So I find his kind of passion for young people was really good, in its influence and what he does in the center, organizing activities and summer programs and so on. So he's greatly missed there because, especially in the movement, because he was a key figure and he had a lot of wisdom. The building that you're in here is African Caribbean Self-Help Organization. This is one of the oldest Pan-African organizations in the country. It started in '64. Coming 1st of August next year, we will be 50 years old. And not many groups were able to have that longevity. And we intend to go on forever as an organization. So I've been involved from an early age. And my first experience is that when we come out of schools and we're in school, we had to fight these white boys because they used to call you monkey and all that. Especially down in 59, you man want to come pick up your coat and raise your tail, monkey. And so you had to deal with the boys, So my mom is a very staunch Garveyite, so she used to say, listen, now you go to school, they're going to do this. My brother told me, he said, when you do that, look for the leader and just drop him, So and then she sent me then, after a while, I mean, able to martial art training and then send me to get Garvey Philosophy and Opinion. And I never looked back since because I've had that book. Now I've passed that on to my youngest daughter because my youngest daughter said she wants the book that I bought way back. So a very cherished book in terms of my political education through my parents. So I've been very active with this group. And then in 1977, we formed the Pan-African Congress Movement. But before that, we had a Pan-African committee to go to the 6th Pan-African Conference in Dar es Salaam. That was the first time it was held in Africa, because it was held in Manchester in 1945. So then it was the first time, under Julius Nyerere, and black people from all over the world was there. Whether it was from India, Australia, New Zealand, they were all there. And it was a very solid black conference. There's some other conference that's taking place in Africa since, and there's others coming up. There's one coming up next year. in South Africa. Well, Marcus Garvey had such a tremendous interest because Marcus Garvey gave us the blueprint to our liberation. And, you know, sometimes people listen to Bob Marley song and then they free your mind from mental slavery. They think it's Bob Marley. It's Garvey. It comes from out of Garvey books, you know. We've used that program to inspire people and to do work, because Garvey sets out a clear program. He's got training manual, he's got he does poetry, and he tells you what you should really do as a race to get up in the world as African people, self-reliance, you know, self-sufficient, and move out into scientific field, and so on. So he talks about a black economy, a black army, a black navy, and Air Force, and he talks about manufacturing. So when you look at Garvey and you look at his history and a man who can organize 11 million people, there are no African on the planet today that organize 11 million black people into revolution, black nationalism. Garvey did it. And Garvey had his network right across the world. If there was no Garvey, there wouldn't be no ANC. And look what they have actually betrayed the teaching of Garvey, you know, with the so-called Rainbow Nation. What rainbow? There ain't no Rainbow Nation on this planet. That's a kind of crazy, stupid mentality, you know. So that's why South Africa is still controlled by whites today. You go down there and you see it. It's plain and simple. So Garvey makes you able to, like, it gives you this thing about travel, because Garvey traveled a lot. So he could assess and analyze the condition of African people. And that's what we do. When we started, and by 68, we had members going to India, Russia, America, Caribbean, South America. So it then gives you a kind of a global overview of the whole African situation, the oppression, the violence, how people can set you against each other. Because if you can set you against each other, as I said earlier, and if you take some people out of the continent by force and you train them and send them in back to attack their own people, you can see what I mean. And that's why, you know, this famous queen in Africa, Yaa Asantewaa, when she see them coming, she said, I'm killing my brothers. She put down her arms and she end up surrendered to the British, end up way down the coast in the island Seychelles. She and Pompey the king. So when they say African people sell each other, they need to study their history. We had 300 years of war to get us out, for us to be sitting in this room. And we have to think about that. 300 years of war just to remove us out of the continent. People think it just happened like that, and you know, this false delusion. You see, and that's what Garvey does for us, and Nana Bonstable ourselves, is that, you see, when the things like Obama come about, it makes you see through the bigger picture. Obama is not for us. Obama is for them. He's working for them. He's not working in our interests. And that's why we can give a clear political analysis of situation, and we can go to Africa. When I go to the Congo and speak at conferences, it gives me that level. Me and Nana relating, and Nana teaching me things and I teach them. So it gives me that understanding where we can actually see things. And I go to the Congo and spend, and I go to a conference in the Congo. I can speak out about what I see. I can speak from the art, and I can speak from what I see, that's the trickery and the skullduggery that white people and Arabs are playing on us. You know, so that's what it has done for both Nana and Garvey. And he loved Marcus Garvey. Because we used to debate with him and Barry Shaggo when they come to us about Garvey, whether Garvey was right in this aspect of the book or that aspect, when it talks about up you mighty race. How do we get to be up as a race? You see, and it shows, you know, with the Garvey practices about the factories he set up, the businesses he set up, the newspapers, and so on. There's much more to Garvey than people think. What them hear, rumors, people just spread rumors about, and this is where we would debate. People would go out and say Garvey was a thief, and you know, people sell him for rice and peace. But you have to look at the whole bigger picture. Attempt assassination on Garvey, framed up by the US government, saying he fraud the mail. All those issues of it. The sabotaging of the ships, by white engineers and black people. And the first FBI agents were black, organized by Edgar Hoover to destroy Garvey movement. So it teaches you a lot. And that's how we grow politically. So both myself and Nana, used to rap. Even when he came down here and he wanted to go buy books for the shops he was running in the centre, he would stop off here and say, "Come on, boy, you're driving to London and driving me back." And I think, as he get on in age, he needed that assistance. So I would drive him to go to Pepperkai Book Distribution to get the books and come back up, and then he would rest again and he'd move on. Or he might not rest, he'd just go on home. Yeah. No, Kwanzaa was started in '66 by Marlon Karanga in the US. And he used to have the organization there in California, I think it was. And he actually looked into African culture, the different harvests, that we have, and when people celebrate and have festival, like you have in Nigeria with the Igbo, they will practice the Yam festival in Tanzania, down that, so in East Africa they can't. So we would got involved in that, and I tell in truth, our organization, the organization, the Elk Farm PACM, African Caribbean Self Help, actually was one of the first groups to start doing Kwanzaa in this country. When we started doing Kwanzaa, it was it's 7 principles and the Nguba Saba. So we have the Kangal, came out there, this Kangal holder there, and it's our 7 Kangals, and the first Kangal is black, and then the others are red and green that represent the Garvey nationalist color, So when we started that, people didn't take to it, because we can be very hostile about our own culture. We will embrace the white man culture of Christmas and not want to embrace your own self. You don't want to be your self. If you love yourself, you want to be yourself. So the whole thing with Kwanzaa, it gives you all the principles that, from cooperative economic, self-determining, purpose, faith, and so on, the whole principles of Kwanzaa. So we start going around, like what's coming up now is that you get the last day of Kwanzaa in this country is usually celebrated in Manchester. And it'll be there this year because Nana started to make sure that it happened every year there in Manchester. So because he's a chair of that branch of the PACM, we have everywhere the branches, they promote it and they go around the country. So Kwanzaa is a very cultural, spiritual practice where people bring food. You make your own present. You don't go buy nothing from the commercial shop. You make your own present to give to people, and you will do it. We have a feast at the end of Kwanzaa, and it's simple. That is more cultural. You have men dancing for the women and children, and the women will dance for the men and children. So and it's always done in a circle. There's libation pouring to the ancestors and respecting the ancestors, and also you will also ask people to perform poetry, singing, and you would ask everybody to make sure what you want to achieve for next year. So it's a very practical program, Kwanzaa, in terms of practicing from the 26th till New Year's, end of New Year's Day, 26th of December to the New Year's, and it's a principle of 7. So that program itself is an ongoing program. It's done throughout the US, in the Caribbean, and now it's more people in Africa is taking it on. So it's gradually spreading globally, So Nana and ourselves as an organization have been trying to push to get that in our communities. So the basic principle of Kwanzaa, you should do it in your home. You know, the whole setup, you do it at home with your own family. You know, and some people will be very pulled back, as I say, because it's too black for them. You know, and sometimes people tell you it's too black because you're being yourself. You're not being somebody else. You're not imitating somebody else. So Kwanzaa is that. It's not about imitating another race and stuff. It's about our own culture. And that what Nana was instrumental and helped to push that as well. I think that when Nana went to Ghana and they installed him as a chief, I think it was one of the biggest achievement for him and his wife. They went to Ghana and got installed as chief. And it was one of the greatest honor to Nana. He was very proud and he appreciated that more than anything, that going to Africa and he get installed as a chief, because it's like he's full circle now. You take us out and enslave us, and here's the prisoner of war going home, back to his homeland, and actually becoming a chief. And he's destined for him to do that. It's the will of the ancestors. That's part of his destiny. So he was very proud of being a chief from Ghana, installed in Ghana. So he was very proud. I would just say, maybe then he, as he would say, word can't describe how he feels about being a chief and the honor of being a chief. You know, that's when we sit and we talk about how it is to be installed. It was really powerful for him. He found that very inspiring, uplifting, and spiritually solid. So he used to, when Kwanzaa and stuff like that, as a chief, he would pour libation, and we were meeting away from the RSA ALD, and he come to the African Liberation Day. He would pour libation. He was very. His title of chief gives him that kind of thing, to be more spiritual and more connected to the universe. People don't know that we are connected to everything we see around us, whether it's tree or rock or earth. And the universe, we are connected. So that kind of understanding was definitely, and that's why he got married in an African tradition. A lot of people don't understand that. He's actually found out his spiritual being, you know, and being one with the Creator, which is this awesome universe that we are on this planet here. I think Nana Bunsen is one of our people that young people should look to look at his political leader, where he's coming from, his background, his struggle, and his fight for his race. And don't waste time, you know, arguing with each other and killing each other in the streets over maybe a mobile phone or a couple of ounce of ganja or something. Be like Nana, upstanding citizen of the African race. So I think Nana Bunsen has went to, you know, from humble beginning to great heights in terms of his political education. There was a massive growth in his political education and his understanding about what it means to be an African. Because that's the important, you know, we can say we're African, but what it means to be African and to live out the role as an African. And, you know, when you go to his Nana home, it's a museum. When I go there, it's a museum. You just start looking around the wall. Everywhere is the statues of carvings and all things of Africa. So he's reached the height of being aware of who he is. And I'm saying the brother was very awesome in his development in consciousness and spirituality and understanding of who he is. You know, as my friend would say, the man in the mirror, because many of us don't understand that, what Michael Jackson was talking about. Every morning you go to the mirror, you don't see a Chinaman, you don't see an Arab, you don't see any other race, but the one race you see that looking back at you, the man in the mirror is an African. And he can only be an African. That's how we are created. We're the longest people on planet Earth. Nana Bunsen know that. And that kind of information need to be passed on to young people. That we're the holiest people on planet Earth. We're the greatest people on the earth that develop science and technology. But today, everybody's making us be bottom of the table not rising, keeping us oppressed, keeping us out the science street. Young brothers are killing each other in the street. They need to look at what Nana Bunsen is about and aspire to be the scientist, the Nana Bunsen, with a political commitment to lift the race out of this kind of oppression and poverty and so on. We're not supposed to be poverty stricken and starving in Africa. As Nana always quote, he says, we're the creator of wealth. We have all the raw material in the world. Yet the biggest contradiction, we're the poorest people in the world. Yeah? And just those things that make the young people know that they can be like him, to be doing the work what he did, so he can hold a mantle up and say, yes, I am a human being, I'm an African, and this is what we want to achieve for the liberation of the mother continent and our people on this planet. I have to laugh because Nana Bunsen, he said he didn't want his enemy to recognize him. He preferred the African government or Caribbean government recognize him. And he found it, he said to me, he found it an insult. Because the people who enslave his people, kill his people, drag us out the continent by force of arm, now turn around and want to give him honor. And he found it insulting, and that's why he refused it. He said he will never take it, and he don't want to take it because it's insulted for anybody to take honor from any institution, whether it's a queen or the government, to say, we recognize you and so on. And he says, so long as they keep us oppressed and they do not pay reparation for the damage they do to them, and even if they pay reparation and say sorry, he still wouldn't take it. Because history, you cannot hide it. You know that these people done this to you. Why now are they trying to come and please you by saying, here's a medal and I'll make you give you a MB and you should be proud to take it from your oppressor. He said he wouldn't do it. And he was staunch against it, and he held out. And people found it strange that here's a man who do a lot of community work, who's committed, and then they're going to give him a MB, and he says, totally, nope, I don't want it. He says, when his community is more appreciative if his community recognize his work and his value of consciousness and what he's contribute to his own race, that's where he wants it from. From his race, nobody else, because his race must honor him as for his work, and that's what he wanted, that his race honor him. We did appreciate his strong nationalist stand and his love for his people, that he would not compromise his position, and that's what's important in life. If you have a principle, stick to it. Don't waver. Some of us waver, and it got us in a lot of trouble. Collaborating with the enemy, and that wasn't Nana's style. There have been many riots in this country, but Nana is always try and make sure if there's a riot, he try to go out there and make sure that the people don't get hurt, our people, and try to show them that you can riot, but you must have an objective. You must have an awareness of what you're doing, and not to get involved in a riot for the sake of rioting. You must have a plan. You must have a blueprint of what you want to achieve and the objective of what you're doing while you're rioting. But he didn't see that you shouldn't riot. He see that you have to protest. And if your protest turns in a riot, it's because of the oppression of the system and the minds of our young people and what they're doing to our young people. And he said that bitterness can only be cured by the serious we develop in institutions to steer our young people from this thing and fight for our own cause. Yeah, he recognized from the beginning, any riots, even from the ones in Liverpool way back in the old days, that we riot because of the oppression that the enemy puts on us. And you would explode. He always said that you would explode if you get all this oppression on top of you, and it just keep coming and then the police is stopping you and searching you and letting you move on and constantly stop search. Somebody might be stopped 10 times and then it boils over every time. Then people then feel then, if the people complain to the police don't do nothing about it. So people then definitely would explode. You know that that people would explode under great pressure. And this system know to apply pressure on African people. They've been doing it a long time, so they know to apply it. And then he wouldn't go out and start, telling people like compromise with the system. He said fight for your rights. So he's very clear about fighting for rights and seeing ourselves more clearly, defining the situation in the streets and he tried to talk to the members of gangs and stuff, and he tried to make sure that they are aware that there are better things they can do, So it's not so much the gang; it's the ordinary people. He would recognize that fed up of the oppression that the system was unleashing on them, and he was very clear on what we should do. We must organize ourselves. Because if you organize, you can make demands. If you disorganize, you can't do anything. So the keys with Nana Buns is organize to liberate yourself. And that's what he was about.